Welcome to another video, guys. Today we are revisiting a car that I've actually driven for the channel twice already. But since I last drove it, the market value for this car has changed drastically. This is a 2008 Porsche 997 generation 911 GT2. Only around 1,200 were produced worldwide and less than 200, 194 to be exact, made it to the US market. Obviously, that makes this car incredibly rare, and I think this car has been undervalued for a long time until very recently. The first time I drove it was a little over a year ago, and at that time the market value based on similar examples for sale was around $170,000. Nowadays, a clean example like this one with just over 23,000 miles is probably closer to 220 to 230 grand. And if you drop that mileage number by around 10,000, the market value goes up to well over $250,000. So the question is this car still a almost $250,000 driving experience? But more so than that, I just wanted another opportunity or excuse to drive this beautiful 997 GT2. So with that said, listen to that. Twin turbocharged Metzger engine, 3.6 liters, pushes out 530 horsepower, 505 pound-feet of torque, sent only to the rear wheels through a 6-speed manual transmission, the only transmission choice for the 997 generation of 911 GT cars. It's got a rear limited slip differential, 245 section width front tire, 325 at the back, and the owner James has put some Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2 tires on it. We've also got carbon ceramic brakes as standard. The first time I buried my right foot in this car, I was completely blown away with the outrageous straight line performance this thing has to offer. The second time I drove this car and I buried my right foot, I was still completely blown away and caught off guard. This is now the third time I've driven this car in probably a year and a half. So let's see if I finally have become accustomed to the performance of this 15-year-old Porsche 911. Just the pure raw performance of this car. Holy cow. Those turbo whooshes and whistles right behind my head. Something else. It's a much more raw and engaging car to drive than a 997 Turbo. That car feels more like a GT. It's heavy, it's soft. It's actually over 300 pounds heavier than this GT2. This car at just under 3,200 pounds is pretty lightweight when you consider it has a heavily turbocharged flat-six engine. And this car has such good steering feel, so even though the power might feel overwhelming at times, you always know what the front end is doing. Of course, this is the last generation of 911 to have had hydraulic steering, and that in itself is noteworthy. While the EPS racks are very precise and very direct, they just don't give you the same level of information about the road. You can tell that this is a very focused driver's car. This is not meant to be an everyday cruiser. It's quite stiff on this just slightly bumpy road even. The shifter requires a lot of effort. The clutch requires even more effort. This is a car that really does require your undivided attention to drive, even just cruising around at 2,000 RPM. Now, although the suspension is firm, the GT2 actually uses the later 997.2 GT3 RS suspension. So there is quite a noticeable difference here compared to a 997.1 GT3. I've driven a .1 GT3 with stock suspension, and that felt a lot more busy and lively and less confidence inspiring. It does take quite a while for these turbos to build boost pressure, despite the fact that they have variable vane geometry, which supposedly should reduce boost lag. Maybe these turbos felt very responsive back in the day, but in 2023, this does feel like old technology. But not in a bad way per se, because I really like the drama that this engine provides. It's a totally different experience to a naturally aspirated GT3 engine that just gives you instant response every time you touch that throttle pedal. This one requires a lot more planning. Trying to accelerate out of a corner, you actually want to get on the gas a split second earlier than you otherwise would. So we have run into quite a bit of traffic on this road here today, but that's okay. I mean, I've already driven this car on a wide open canyon road twice, and I'll put the links to those reviews in the video description if you want to see what a 997 GT2 feels and sounds like being driven flat out. But let's see if we can at least get a couple of straight line pulls in here. Outrageous. When the turbos spool up, it just shoves you in the back of your seat. Oh my God. This car is just so fast. And it's not even necessarily about the actual speed that you're going. Yes, this car will do some big numbers on the dash if you bury your right foot long enough, but that speed is even more enhanced by the sensation that you have when you drive it. This car is so raw. You feel everything through the steering, through the seat, through the chassis, and it has very high NVH levels inside the cabin. You hear everything that's going on. The sensation of speed is even greater than the speed itself. And that, in my opinion, makes this car in some ways even more special to drive than a much newer GT3. For example, a 991.2 GT3 makes 500 horsepower, only 30 less than this GT2. But this car makes you think you're going way faster even when you're not. And so this car is sort of in a unique position. It is 15 years old, but it still has a modern level of performance. When you couple the amount of performance this car delivers to the enhanced sensation of performance, you have something that really feels very, very special. Newer performance cars are incredibly capable, but they will not give you the same sensation of speed. And that's an edge that this GT2 has even over a 997 GT3. Just look at that. I can't put my foot down for more than 2 seconds. Having driven a lot of modern performance cars since the last time I drove this GT2, I understand why this car now commands close to $250,000. And in my mind, this car is worth the price. There aren't a whole lot of cars that'll give you this kind of driving experience. You have to be able to look past the numbers to understand what this car is really about, or at least what it offers in 2023. The numbers, as impressive as they are, do not tell the whole story. And for that reason, the 997 GT2 remains one of my top 5 to 6 cars that I've ever driven. That'll never get old. And of course, being a GT car, it's not all about the straight line performance, is it? It's about the handling, and this car has that in spades. Now, the heel toe downshifts are a little tricky because the throttle response is not quite consistent enough compared to an NA engine, but that's a trade-off you'd expect. Way better front end feel than any 996 generation 911, including the GT3. Just feels so planted. I just can't help but giggle every time I put my foot down. What a fantastic car. I've driven my fair share of GT3s, but I've got to say, the GT2 is just, it's in a different league. Not necessarily in a better or worse way. It's very different. The engine just makes all the difference in the world. It really does define the driving experience of this car. The GT3 is all about high revs, perfect linear throttle response, while giving you enough but not an excessive amount of power. The GT2 doesn't give you that same perfect throttle response, and it doesn't rev nearly as high. I mean, redline's around 7,000 in this thing. But the drama when you're waiting for those twin turbos to spool up, and then the rush of boost that pushes your head into the seat, that's something a GT3 could never replicate. So another big thank you to the owner James for letting me get behind the wheel of his GT2 once more. If you're one of the lucky few who has a GT2 in the garage, I say hold on to it. It's such a special driving machine. Let me know what you think of the 997 GT2. Would you take this over a 997 GT3? maybe even over a 997 GT3 RS, or dare I say, even a 992 GT3. Let me know what you think in the comments. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys in the next one.